Welcome back to Business Week here on Arise News. To get into some of this week's top business headlines and other topics with me today is Ugodre Obi-Chukwu, founder and partner at Nairametrics Financial Advocates. Ugo is a chartered accountant with over 18 years experience. He's also a certified investor relations practitioner and registered member of the UK IR Society. So good to speak to you, Ugo.
Yeah.
And the first story we're going to be discussing today is the fact that the Center for Economics and Business Research has actually predicted that the world will go into recession in 2023. But other sources are saying it's just going to be a slowdown. What are your thoughts?
I doubt that. The thing is, when you say there's going to be a global recession, you would want to assume that it's a recession everywhere.
Yeah.
I doubt you're going to have a recession in all countries. But
so where are going to be the hotspots?
What you'll likely see is a slowdown. Hotspots will probably be Europe. I think there's likely going to be recession in Europe. Maybe look at Italy, Spain, UK. They could slip into a recession. Of course, that's because of the Russia-Ukraine crisis. US, I think, might steady, right? China would slow down. Japan will slow down. Africa, I think there will be a slowdown. So you won't really see a widespread, that's my own opinion, you won't see a widespread recession, but you see slowdowns in pockets of countries. And of course, the reasons are clear. You have Russia-Ukraine crisis, is likely like that's going to linger on next year.
Yeah.
I thought that we're going to see some kind of, diplomatic solution towards the end of this year, but that's not happening. In fact, it looks like, things are exacerbating. So it might cause a bit of a stir, at least the first half of next year. And of course, central banks across the world are tightening interest rates. And so that is probably going to be the biggest driver of global economic slowdown next year. And because as you're tightening interest rates, of course, rates go up and then people can't really buy. And then, inventory people start having inventory cutbacks and then production starts to slow. So that is where you're seeing a lot of all the headwinds. But I don't think there will be that sort of global recession that you expect. Yeah,
I mean, some of the other main voices on this, the IMF and World Bank, are all saying it's just going to be a slowdown. But tell me about the impact on frontier markets like Nigeria. If we did enter a scenario where we went into recession globally, what would be the implications for this market domestically?
Well, I mean, we saw this in 2009-10, and when we had this sort of global recession, back then. And the thing is, for frontier markets like Nigeria, Ghana, South Africa, what you tend to see is, higher interest rates causing, triggering increased inflation down here. And then you see governments can't really borrow. You start to see debt crisis. You start to see a lot of migration. So we're already seeing some of those things happening here. And then if that, you start to see global recessions in Europe or particularly in the Western world or in China, then that has huge impacts for us here in Africa, particularly when it comes to inflation. And that is happening already. In fact, I do predict inflation is probably going to hit 30-40% across sub-Saharan Africa because of, some of these headwinds that we're seeing.
Yeah.
And then of course investments, particularly you're going to see stock markets suffer next year because when you start to have global recessions and you have investors pull out funds, nobody's going to come to frontier markets until things start to settle. And of course that's opportunities for people anyway.
And it's interesting we've been talking about this because the ECB is looking at yet further rate hikes.
Yeah.
I mean, is the concern and risk around inflation so serious that this policy trend is going to continue? That has huge implications for growth and consumer demand. What are your thoughts?
You see, I can't really blame them, right? Inflation is such an evil, and they know what, they still remember the experience of the late 70s and early 80s, the experience they had with inflation, the galloping inflation. And there's already fear that if you do not aggressively slow down inflation, then this might just lead to a stagflation, and that is even a lot more difficult to fix. And the implication here is that you're probably going to have, people, governments get toppled. You're going to have politicians start to, feel rattled. And when you have high inflation, it's huge social political issues for countries, and they can't stand things like this. So I think that's why they're running scared. The economies they've basically heated the economy up over the last few years with a lot of the stimulus packages that we've had because of the Russia-Ukraine crisis. And so that is likely to, continue to, force them to increase interest rates widespread. So I don't see them pulling back anytime soon. Rather, they're going to keep increasing interest rates rather aggressively. Already, like pretty well, countries like the Netherlands already having 17% inflation rate. Inflation rate across Europe is like 10%. So that thing is going off. It's basically uncontrollable at the moment.
It's really getting out of hand. And what is really worrying is this constant tension between, trying to rein in inflation, but also trying to stimulate the economy. And the concern is that if, the rate policy goes too far, then we're literally good. You mentioned stagflation, but we're going to see an ripple impact on consumer demand, which then affect key sectors of the economy, which are heavily dependent on consumer spending, and we'll enter this vicious cycle. But it's interesting to see what happens with the rest of that particular policy trend. There's a very interesting story here on the world's billionaires and their net worth. Elon Musk was mentioned, and even some of the figures being quoted as resulting in a decrease. I'm still like, that is still a significant amount of net worth. But I mean, why should we care that the net worth...
1.4 trillion is staggering.
It is staggering, right? Yeah. So tell us more. I mean, why does this matter?
It does, So the funny thing is that when you see billionaires lose 1.4 trillion, that to a large extent also reflects how much, losses a lot of people have actually incurred for their portfolios. I've also incurred losses in my portfolio. And so if billionaires can be losing this much, and that just gives an idea of what is happening globally. So the interesting thing is it's been round the world, and there's been winners and losers as well. I guess the losers will be Mark Zuckerberg. I think he's probably the top, lost 65% of his net worth in 1 year. I think most of it happened between the second half of this year.
And is most of that stock markets, investments, or even cryptocurrency?
Yeah. So for a lot of them, I guess for Mark, it was the bet that he had with the metaverse. I think that didn't really work out well, at least for now. So he's lost 65% of his fortune. Elon Musk was flirting with Twitter and a lot of the stuff that he's done. I think I was reading an article and they said, look, easy come, easy go. So it easily went into Twitter and now easily losing his wealth as well. So he's looking for fame, and that also affected. I think he's lost 50% or so. Then on the flip side, you have the Chinese. The Chinese have had serious economic issues as well, and that's also eroded a lot of the wealth of their billionaires, of course, because of COVID-19. And then, of course, the Russian billionaires as well. They lost a lot of them,
too. And have actually been hit by sanctions in many of the markets where they've invested in.
So that's why they lost a lot. And then you go to the US, they actually had wins and losses there as well. Some of the US billionaires have made some money, particularly the ones who invested in sporting franchises. I think they've made some good money. Bill Gates also lost money, by the way. Indians as well, you've also seen some of them creep up. And then, of course, the French billionaire, the owner of LVMH, I think he also lost, by the way, but he's now the richest man in the world. So you've seen that global wealth sort of shift a little bit. And that is likely to sustain into the new year. And let's not even joke about it. We've had asset bubbles over the last 3 years, and a lot of their wealth as well were also due to the bubbles that you've seen. At some point, Facebook's were at all-time high, Tesla was at all-time high. And so what you expect is that when investors start to pull out, their net worth starts to reduce as well, and that's what's happening.
Very interesting story. The final thing I wanted to quickly touch on is food price inflation. That trend has been on for months, and it continues. What are your thoughts heading into 2023?
I'm scared. I'm worried. I just came back from the East yesterday, and fuel price there is about 300 naira per liter, likely going to 350. I heard some people on my Twitter timeline said it's about 400 in some parts of the country. And these things haven't fed into food price inflation yet. Food price inflation is about 24% now. So I'm really running scared. I think that if we don't take time, by the first half of next year, when we're looking at 30-35% inflation rate, and if we're not even there already, so it's a big problem. And of course, this is a combination of a lot of things, from logistic issues to high interest rates to fuel scarcity to just different kind of problems.
And clearly, there's obviously a need to strengthen some of the structural constraints so that we're able to weather this storm. But a very interesting topic and dynamics heading into 2023. So great chatting with you, Ugo. Thanks for being with us.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.